Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Blood, Dust and Snow, Chapter 8. July the 19th, 1941. 12:18. I have just been to the field kitchens and got myself 2 slices of bread and some coffee. That was necessary. I was so hungry that I very nearly fainted. I'd been asleep for about 2 hours when I was suddenly woken up by wild shooting. First, I fail to understand what is going on, and it takes me a second to realize the Russians are trying to break through. Just outside the tent, in fact. It's whistling and hissing over our heads and through the bushes and fruit trees. Where exactly the Russians are is hard to tell precisely. It's banging from all corners and sides. Just up, quickly, and into the tank, but the turret hatch doesn't open. I try the driver's hatch instead. I have to climb over Kuhlborsch, who's already at the sticks because he has been sleeping in the tank. With one arm I pull myself up on the gun and marsch marsch! Off we go. First, we head straight towards the village road, as only there will we have a field of fire and will be able to see what's going on. But we are not getting that far because all of a sudden Kuhlborsch takes our vehicle straight into the ditch opposite the road and it immediately sheds both of its tracks. In addition, the floor hatch comes to rest on a big stone boulder. Now, that wasn't very talented, and we have to bail out. I draw the pistol from my pocket and return to the garden, which is home to the rest of the company. Some men are running around wildly, while others just stand around with their hands in their pockets. The boss is nowhere to be found, and no one knows where he is. So I have to organize a defense with that rabble. Jürgensmeyer turns up and I give him a whole lot of men who are standing around. I then send the whole assembly to the edge of the village, which I think is most threatened. I gather up some more men with which I intend to secure the north side, where all hell has broken loose. The vehicles of the baggage train, mingled with tanks and the self-propelled flak, are clumped into one big pile, so I start to get order into that first. This motley crew makes me want to puke. Unteroffizier Vogel and his crew have their tent set up 200 meters away from their vehicle. He and his gang are still calmly asleep, but I have woken that fellow up all right, I can tell you. Never in my life have I encountered someone that stupid, but he's not the only one to make a fool of himself. The shooting seems to be nearby one moment and far away the next. It seems that the Russians are coming from the north, trying to thrust through our open flank in an effort to help the Russian forces encircled at Gedorf. Anyway, we have enough troops down here, and if they are not asleep like the members of our gang, we'll beat the living daylights out of the Russians. Soon, all our lorries have disappeared from the open field and have taken camouflaged positions under trees and next to house walls. The crews are standing in readiness beside their tanks. Those tanks which are not roadworthy I put in such places where they at least have an open field of fire to the north. The boss, Lope and platoon Ulrich then head out on the road to Gedorf, from where dense Russian columns are approaching with the intention to turn north and break through to Narva. I have to stay behind with the remaining lot. Well, at least that way I can catch up on some sleep. The little bit of shooting doesn't concern us massively anymore. I crawl beneath the tarpaulin on one of the maintenance lorries, which offers protection against the ice-cold wind from the north, which started blowing yesterday. It is freezing cold. Under that tarpaulin I catch up on some much-needed sleep. In the last 2 nights we have only slept for about 3 hours in total. At midday the whole business is over. A dispatch rider delivers a message which orders the remainder of the company to the crossroads at Vercellani. There we are to fall in behind the heavy infantry platoon of the infantry regiment 118 and then march to Gedorf. I tell my people to get ready and then head out with all my stuff ahead of the baggage. The scene at the crossroads is terrible. Dead Russians, wherever one looks, the whole area is littered with them, dead horses between them and shot up vehicles at the side of the road. Among them there are more and more Russian dead. In some places, draft horses are still standing in harness in front of abandoned and destroyed field guns. There is quite a large number of those on the road and a heavy flak battery too. Never before have I seen so many dead, shredded corpses. They lie on the road, in the ditches and in the fields. At Ledinki there was a whole pile of corpses in front of our vehicles, but not nearly as many as here. The few kilometers from the crossroads to Gedorf are full of carts, gun carriages, limbers, cars, cannons, lorries and all kinds of other equipment. Then we roll into town. Through the haze we can see Lake Peipus on our right. A few boats are visible too. Apparently they are Russian, evacuating fleeing troops to the north into still unoccupied territory. We park our vehicles alongside an old town wall and give the men time until 1550 to equip themselves with anything they might be lacking. There is not much for them to organize here. Many houses have burned out, the others are bustling with lancers. The Russians have been given hell here. I decide not to stay with the vehicles but walk down to a square open space alongside the lake where the prisoners are being kept. Under the trees there are large numbers of wounded who are being treated by women dressed in riding boots and trousers. A Russian surgeon who looks more like a butcher is standing between them with his hands in his pockets, doing absolutely nothing. We don't have enough dressing material for all the wounded here. The Russians themselves carry nothing of the sort with them. A woman in a civilian coat, under which the uniform of the Russian Women's Battalion is visible, approaches. She wants to have a passport proving that she has been discharged here and asks to be allowed to stay with the wounded. She is sent to find and fetch white linen which can be used as dressing material. The flag has taken the duty of guarding the prisoners. One of the flag soldiers is calling for a Lieutenant Sander. In the first moment I hesitate, trying to place the man and wondering where he knows me from. But no, I've never seen him. I then go to see their commander, a lieutenant of the flag, who introduces himself to me as Sander, and then looks at me with big eyes when I, for a laugh, say Sander in return. Then laughter on both sides. He tells me that his ancestors were farmers and fishermen in Hanover and Mecklenburg, but that's only a side note. The other Sander then gives me permission to take a closer look at the prisoners. There are 1,500 of them. Alongside a fence separated from the others, there are about 20 more. They are Volga Germans who had been forced to serve in the Russian army. Admittedly, the creatures are not very confidence-inspiring. But anyhow, they have at least some German blood in their veins, and thus they have been separated from the Mongols, Caucasians and Russians. They only speak broken German, strongly mixed with Russian, and they find it difficult to understand our High German. After all, their ancestors were Swabians who had come to the Volga as settlers. For me, they are Bolsheviks, just like the others. They too have taken up arms against us and have fought in the ranks of the Red Army. But then, the party knows best what to do with such people. The other Red Army men are a savage-looking lot. A few civilians are among them, communists in civilian clothing, caught carrying weapons. 2 more men in civilian dress are brought up. They had tried to set fire to a captured petrol storage and, in the process, had fired on our men. Flak Lieutenant Sander's question about what to do with the pigs is met with a short reply by an adjutant on the general staff. Shoot them. The 2 are led behind a house. A few minutes later, a few pistol shots can be heard. Done. Sorted. A couple fewer fanatical Bolsheviks. More and more prisoners arrive. The space is filling up quickly and there will be enormous numbers of that riffraff out there hiding in the scrub along our advance route. They will only surrender after days when the wretches get hungry and thirsty. 2 whole regiments are still out there somewhere in the woods at Gedov. They try to escape towards the southwest of the lake where there are none of our troops yet. They should be hamstrung pretty soon. Nearby, 2 generals and their staff are assigning defensive sections to the regiments. Near the generals stands another prisoner, a lieutenant colonel of the Reds, who doesn't look as animalized as the dead officers we have seen so far. The captain who shot himself at Zedinki and the dead major at the village of Lipyagi, whose documents we had been able to capture, matched the image of the Bolshevist upstart far better than this man, who made a very good and calm impression on me. I asked the Sonderführer translator if I am allowed to talk to the man to find out his age and about his family. The officer then tells me that he is 39 years old. His father had been a Kolezhsky Sovietnik under the old Tsarist regime. The Sonderführer explains to me that this was a kind of higher-ranked state chamberlain. The Russian had heard us talk about the commissars and then remarked of his own accord that there were commissars in every unit from company level upwards. From 1940, however, their power had been much reduced by Timoshenko and only the officers had the power to command. The commissars were left with political supervision. The 2 generals, one commanding the 36th and 56th Infantry Division and the other some corps commander, a 2-star, had ended their briefing. The latter, a friendly and corpulent man, then took the Russian officer away in his car. I took a few photographs of the prisoners and then returned to my company at the town hall where we awaited new orders from Neuling. July 20th, 1941. Our subordination to the 36th Infantry Division ended yesterday. We've caught up with our old lot in the 6th Panzer Division. There have been some big changes. Theo Langenbruch, together with all men he still had with him, have been transferred to the 1st Company. Hille has become Company Commander. Oberleutnant Gleskin is leading our lot with the usual self-aggrandizement and has conducted himself towards me in quite a nasty manner. Well, let's see what's coming next. Up until then, I will keep my composure. That way so far has brought me greatest success. Neuling has gone to the regiment to report the return of the company. After that, he will have spoken to Hille about vehicle replacements. I wonder what news he is going to bring. And I hope he'll bring some mail too. It is now 1700 hours in the evening. I've had a bit of a kip from 2 to 4:30 p.m. and in the mornings we get up at 0500 to be able to get to work from 0600. They are now already working on my tank, however, so that doesn't need to be done in the morning. Our 4 vehicles are with 7th Company again. Yesterday evening, Krautwurst, Schöner's former driver, arrived here. Then there's my vehicle, which I had to take from Feldwebel Bartnek, including Bartnek's driver and gunner Rink. Obergefreiter Tamschik is the radio operator. Bartnek is a nasty customer. He had hoarded a tremendous amount of stuff, which he spent hours packing up when I took over from him. The fact that he took one of the 2 tins of ration sausage for himself and several additional tins of meat as well was totally excessive and shows what kind of a character that man is. But he's known for that kind of behavior among the men of the company. I'm sitting here in a Russian farm cottage. Our tank is parked alongside the wall outside. This afternoon, Unteroffizier Kossenjans, the medic, and the driver of his motorcycle combination, Gefreiter Hoyers, have cooked and fried a chicken and potatoes here. It's been ages since I last had such an appetizing smell in my nostrils. Gefreiter Hoyers is from Hamburg and, due to his dialect, is commonly known as Hein. He is a good-natured, stocky fellow who reaches up to my chin. A racing driver, driving instructor and mechanic by trade. Previously, 7 years of service in the Reichspost and then maintenance sergeant in the OT. He is a masterful organizer. For the 7th Company, he has organized a small Ford lorry and also a captured Russian one. Thus, they had allowed the 2 to continue to drive around in their own motorcycle combination, although they would have preferred a little car instead. Hein is married and has 4 children. He's a reservist, 28 years old and a very good soul. He's also on the ball like no other soldier. The 2 ate their chicken, but they forced me to have a bit as well, and from the fried potatoes too. I've made sure that everything, when the 2 couldn't eat anymore, went straight to Panzer mechanic Hoppmann of the 5th Company, who today, a Sunday, has been slaving away like mad. That boy and his mates are constantly at work without having the time to enjoy any of the few comforts we soldiers are able to get hold of out here. When we called him into our cottage, Hoppmann was wondering what else he was supposed to do for us, but then he made big eyes when the nice fat potatoes were offered to him. Hoppmann has been in charge of repairs since Feldwebel Spieler was hospitalized with jaundice. We've organized 2 stools and a sturdy table for our place, and now we can sit comfortably for eating and especially writing. With my little notebook, I am usually sitting up on the tank where I write whenever we have to wait for our advance. It has become oddly cold in the past days, and one has to keep one's fingers in the coat pockets. One is really freezing in the cold north wind. One has to put a pullover on at night. It is now 2200 hours and I am taking our 4 tanks, the maintenance platoon and the petrol lorry back to our old lot. They are further up towards the front and will probably be among the first to be deployed. After all, we are not too far away from Petersburg anymore. Today we have received mail, a lot of very nice mail actually, that put me into a proper Sunday mood. Soon we'll be back with our first Abteilung. July the 21st, 1941, Monday. 2100 hours. I will make an attempt to put a few lines on paper amid the enormous number of mosquitoes. It was absolutely impossible. There were thousands of mosquitoes, undeterred by the smoke of a multitude of fires. So I have now installed myself in a cottage in which NCOs and men of the old 5th Company are playing cards. They have cleaned the hovel nicely and made sure it is free of any vermin. I have to admit that the houses up here in the area of the Gulf of Finland are all quite clean, and I was surprised that one can find so many images of the saints in them. I've taken one of them. Its lines are rather unique and remind me of our ancient religious depictions of bishops and saints. I have also taken a look at the chapel here in the village. To our eyes, it all appears to be a bit tacky with the many gilded paintings. The Black Madonna of Częstochow, the painting heavily varnished and, except for the uncovered parts of the body like hands and face, over and over covered with gold and silver. The painted areas, unprotected from the air, darken over time and contrast strongly with the bright silver, giving the impression that there is a Jewish or Asian woman looking at the observer. In general, it is surprising that the Bolsheviks allow the Orthodox farmers up here to follow their old religious customs. They are using the Kolkhoz farmer newspaper as wallpaper, on which they then hang the old painting of the saints made in the days of the Tsars. Incidentally, we have found many old banknotes of the Tsarist period in the houses, some quite valuable 1,000 ruble notes. The farmer's house is packed full. In the window, our company radio is playing the news. In the east, everything is progressing as planned, it says. Soon, at 22:30, there will be a bit more space when the sentries take their posts. We have put quite a lot of them out, as it is not particularly nice to be surprised and slaughtered in one's sleep by a Red Army attack at 0300 in the morning. There is a lot of action in this area. Even though we are resting, we only do so with a pistol in the trouser pocket. The Russians often and unexpectedly break through in places, and then we have to recapture the ground they have gained. I wonder if the Russians will be making another appearance here again. In a village not far from here, larger formations have been identified and taken under fire by our artillery. Now Hille is leading the company. Theo has the 1st platoon, Karl Bongard the 2nd, Febble Wünsche the 3rd, and I have the 4th, which now consists of 4 vehicles and my own. I wonder if we will be attached to the 65ers. I wouldn't really like that. Hauptmann Stern, who was decorated with the Knight's Cross for his actions in Raseiniai, is said to be a very good man and very calm. But now, lights out, aircraft are coming. July the 21st, 1941, Tuesday, 1400 hours. We've put our chairs and table underneath the barn door. Tamschik, the radio operator, is digging a foxhole and Rink has to help clean one of the farmers' houses. Tonight, we can then write our letters in there. One can dare to enter the houses here, as they are generally all quite clean. In the evenings, one can then find some protection from the mosquitoes and also write some letters and do other things. There'll be card players again too. As the group members don't know what else to do with their money, some Lancers have started gambling for quite large sums. Thankfully, that has now been forbidden by Hauptmann Stern. The chaps call it 21 and it's often about pots of 100 marks and more. This is really not my thing. If they at least played Skat instead, where one doesn't have to rely on individual luck, it would be preferable. At midday, there are significantly smaller numbers of mosquitoes airborne. In the evenings, it is literally unbearable. I just realized that I could do with a few minutes of sleep. More later. Now then, I have slept enough. Thankfully, there weren't mosquitoes inside my tent. Probably too hot for the nasty buggers. By the way, if it's too hot for the mosquitoes, they are usually replaced by fat horseflies. Anyway, one day there will be an end to it, I'm sure. This morning I was with the baggage, which is not far away. The tailor and the shoemaker were also at work there, so I took the opportunity to have my trousers repaired, which were quite spectacularly torn. I also accessed my suitcase, depositing several maps of our advance route in it. The key I keep in the document case, which is stored on Oberfeldwebel Oswald's lorry, together with the captured material, but I managed to open it by trying a few other keys. I wonder when I will ever be wearing the clothing inside it again. Here in the village, everyone is keenly looking for additional supplies. The crews of the 65ers closer towards the road have discovered a pile of potatoes in the cellar of one of the houses there. Rink, my assistant gunner, has found a large piece of honeycomb. Rink and Tamschik have liquefied it over a petrol fire. I've just seen that Feldwebel Goslar and crew have caught 3 chickens further up in the village. Oberholz is now scrubbing the washing bucket in which the cleanly plucked and gutted beasts will soon be boiled over the Primus cooker. Tonight, the 4 men will have a great dinner. A few more supplies never do any harm. Yesterday I was up on the roof with the aerial observer of the Luftwaffe signals platoon. The view from up there is quite spectacular. The land around here is really very beautiful. The village is up on a hill which is surrounded by and overlooks a dense area of woodland. Behind that there are swamps. The air up here is really nice. The many mosquitoes seem to come from the land below. At the edge of the hill, in a ravine, there is a crystal clear spring with drinkable water. Next to that, there are 2 wells from which the local field kitchens draw their water. Well, at least they used to until some damned idiot made one of them unusable when they washed themselves there and polluted the entire water supply with soap. What a mess. The water supply is a difficult matter out here. Each unit should be equipped with tornister filter apparatuses. It is odd that equipment like that is only ever found in the staff headquarters, isn't it? In that of 2nd Abteilung, Gläsgen, Rittgen and Möscher, the physician, have one of them in their quarters. It is a disgrace when officers receive special rations or supplies of any kind. A common thing, especially in the unit staffs. The gentlemen sit together in the evening talking about all the commodities they'd like to have, and then they send one of their men out. "Hey you, listen up. What don't you go and fetch us something or other? Or isn't this and that available here anywhere?" Ah well, I shouldn't complain. If one's crew is on the ball, they can indeed organize all kinds of things. Just need to look at Henselke. No idea how he has managed to find us that chicken. And how Rink, who is a rather slow-paced character, found that honey, only God knows. Right now, the air is filled with an enormous booming, humming sound. 25 German bombers are returning home from a mission. They are coming from Leningrad, which is only 120 kilometers away from here. And now the fighter escort is returning as well. They are racing back to the airfield and our best wishes accompany them. Since the start of the campaign in the east, our Lancers have learned to respect the Luftwaffe. All along the Rollbahn, we have seen what even a single bomber can do to a marching column. One fighter after another is now returning also. The yellow band around their fuselages and the yellow wingtips are glowing in the sunlight. Everyone is delighted to see them. I've looked at the map and we are indeed only 120 kilometers from Leningrad. Yesterday, our 58th Infantry Division stood only 5 kilometers from the Narva. It is also possible that the bombers were deployed there to make sure that Voroshilov's withdrawing troops are being kept on their toes. The railway line along the Narva is also being bombed relentlessly. The Russians are still attacking, but their men are very clearly exhausted. If even the Russians are folding like that now, how must the French have felt when they experienced the same last year? Today, at about 1900 hours, Hille arrived with the news that Theo Langenbruch will be transferred away to the leadership reserve of the staff on the 2nd Abteilung. That's the right thing to do. Langenbruch has done much more than his fair share of the fighting. A bit later today, we'll all sit down together for a nice chat. At the moment, however, everyone is still sitting outside playing cards. Tomorrow, I will take charge of 1st Platoon, now equipped with vehicles from our old 5th Company. Here in the house, some of the men are brewing coffee and preparing dinner. There's always sufficient food here, all well prepared by Enz, our head chef and Unteroffizier. The coffee supply situation, however, is worse. The grain coffee doesn't taste very nice, but it's good enough when one is thirsty and one can still sleep after having had a few cups. The boss has got himself a samovar and is using it to make tea and coffee. July the 23rd, 1941. Wednesday, 1500 hours. A lot has happened today. Several Russian bombers came over and scored a few direct hits on the artillery column of the 1st Infantry Division. Nasty, very nasty for the artillerymen. 7 of them dead. 15 more or less severely wounded soldiers, 12 horses killed, and Tamchik, my radio operator, wounded when a bomb splinter hit his calf. That's the result of an attack by 5 Russian SB-2 bombers and of some clowns shouting, "They're Germans! They're Germans!" without having clearly identified them. Tamchik was in great pain and couldn't put any weight on his right leg with the splinter in it. The boy made a brave face, however, and tried not to show how much it hurt him. Langenbruch and Neuling have driven him to the hospital in Valovo now. I had sent Tamchik out to fetch oil for our tank from the vehicle baggage train. At that moment, the artillery column of the 1st ID was just passing the crossroads and one of its sections turned off the road to have a break here in Likovska. Then 5 red bombers appeared and flew over the main road without anyone identifying them as Russian. Only when they began to fire their machine guns into the column 200 meters to our right were they identified correctly. At that point, they had also released their bombs, and Tamschik, who had seen what was going on, had thrown himself into the roadside ditch for cover. The bombs slammed right into the 2 still undamaged houses, which are being used as a staff HQ and a field dressing station, while others fell among the densely packed carts and vehicles of the artillery section. Not normal high-exploding bombs, mind you, but particularly nasty splinter bombs, which had a tremendous effect on the large, unprotected targets. 7 men dead instantly, and another 2 died while they were being prepared for transport to hospital. 18 more wounded in addition. Just as bad is the loss of 12 horses. The beasts are irreplaceable out here in the east. Some ammunition carts were also heavily damaged. After the dust had settled, Tamschik had started tending the wounded. After he had bandaged a man who had lost an arm and also had a large bomb splinter sticking in his thigh, he suddenly noticed the pain in his own leg. He then tried to walk over to the Kübelwagen of the boss, but only managed to walk a few steps before the pain made him collapse. Before Theo and Tamschik left, we shook hands with them, wished them all the best and break a leg, and then they drove away. In the morning at 8 a.m., Theo said farewell to his company, which he had taken to his heart. We also took a few photographs. Yesterday night, I had brought half a liter of schnapps, good Russian stuff, and I poured the contents into a samovar. I don't think I ever drank a better cup of tea. At 10 p.m., we had to put out the lights because of the Russian flyers, but we still sat together in the darkness for a long time after that. Later, Enz came over and whispered into Theo's ear that he still had some food left for us in the field kitchen. Theo, Oswald and I went there and were given the most excellent beef liver with new potatoes. God, they tasted nice. All washed down with a big cup of bean coffee. After all the coffee and tea, it wasn't surprising that I couldn't find any sleep. The tent isn't entirely sealed either. There are a few rips and tears, which I tried to cover up with a mixture of German and Russian tent squares, but even those didn't do the trick. All through the night, zzz 1, zzz 2, the damned mosquitoes came in. At the moment, it is 2300 hours, and I am sitting with Feldwebel Rehberg and a few men of the 65th in a Russian hovel. An oil lamp is flickering. I am writing, Rehberg is reading a novel, while the other boys are playing cards. A paper sketch pad is used to keep the tally. After the war, the sums will be added up and paid out. They're not playing for money here, only for entertainment. Yesterday, I had to laugh when Lieutenant Karl Bongard, with a stern face, said to Oswald and Wünsche, "Gentlemen, you still owe me money." I wondered how enormous that sum must be if someone wants to have it back while there's a war going on. Wünsche asked, "How much was it again, Herr Leutnant?" And Bongard replied, "Oswald needs to give me 6 pfennigs and 14 pfennigs from you." And then he did indeed collect the debt. Now then, the tanks of the Neuling Company, which I have been waiting for, have just arrived. Outside, one can still hear the hum of Russian bombers, and as such, I want to get the guys away from the crossroads as quickly as possible. All through the night, the Russians are circling above, and they have already dropped some bombs on Volovo. July the 24th, 1941, Thursday. We are still resting in Likovska today. Yesterday, another platoon of the old 5th Company arrived here. 2nd Abteilung is only raising the platoons now and is then transferring them to the 1st Abteilung and Abteilung 65. Wilhelm Lope has also ended up in Abteilung 65. I saw him yesterday evening with the platoon of heavy tanks, which is going to go to the 3rd Company of the 65th Abteilung. Simon is also going there. Just a moment ago, Jungkamp skidded through the corner in his Praga, next to him Knust, who by now has also been promoted to lieutenant. They are also going into the leadership reserve. They've both done their share at the front. That they are sending Wilhelm Lope, a married man, to the front again, though, that I can't quite understand. Well, at least old foxes like him and me know that we have been through every single day of this campaign right at the front. One day there will be a blessing from above for us too as well. One can't share the single Iron Cross first class that the 2nd Abteilung has received so far. And that had gone to the senior physician. I hope our lot won't be entirely fucked over when the next batch of medals is due. That is of great concern at the moment. Another chapter done, a little fighting this time, but lots of interesting info about living in the field. For one, our author mentions the card games and the, at one point, rather enormous stakes. He talks about pots as high as 100 Reichsmark, which is equal to about 500 euros today. It is understandable that leadership at some point put an end to this and the stakes became reasonable again. At the end, another lieutenant is collecting debts and he's claiming 6 and 14 Pfennig, which is about 30 cents and 70 cents respectively. I'm sure it was all in good fun. Another thing is the description of the so-called Tornister Filtergerät or the Haversack water filtering device. Now, this is an interesting device. It was a portable hand-crank operated filter system with a filtering capacity between 80 and 200 liters per hour, depending on contamination. I will put images on screen. It weighed about 22 kilograms or 45 pounds and consisted of an intake hose with a strainer on the end, the pump wheel for some dude to work, and a magazine for a total of 4 filtering elements. These elements weren't treated in a special way. It was tightly packed cotton or wool that would filter out suspended elements in the water. Now, the field manual explicitly states that it will reliably filter out bacteria from dead animals and other such stuff and make the water drinkable. It will not, however, filter out taste, odor, or chemical agents. But hey, it's better than nothing, I guess. The filter packets could be replaced individually and the device then cleaned. Each company was issued one of these. There were additional specialists on the regimental or battalion level who were trained in water analysis and treatment and could provide additional support when it came to the choice of a water source. The whole system was quite advanced, since the Wehrmacht did not want huge outbreaks of dysentery or similar illnesses like in World War I. Nowadays, we generally get fresh water in bottles or from the tap. In emergencies, we can use chlorine tablets to purify water from most sources if a fire isn't available. Drinking from any other source is strictly prohibited and with good reason. Anyway, thank you for watching, consider subscribing, and I will see you again in the next episode. Cheers.